Hello students, in previous lecture we have studied about the limitations of VBT theory. Then today we are going to discussing on the crystal field theory. We have already studied about the postulates or features of VBT theory. Then there are few drawbacks which is overcomes the difficulties in the VBT is overcomes in CFT theory, that is crystal field theory. Then there are some assumptions given by the CFT theory, that is according to that assumption or features we can form the different types of coordinate bonds or coordinate compounds. First of all, we have to discussing on that assumption by taking examples of that. Then see here the first assumption, that is, see here VBT theory explains that any coordination compound which containing central metal ion, it is covalently bonded with the ligands. That means here the covalent bonding, nature of coordination bond, that is covalent bonding is covalent bonding is present in ligands and central metal ion. That means nature of that bond is covalent in nature. Covalent nature means all of you studied in previous lecture. That is covalent nature means here electron pair shared between ligands and metal ion and overlapping of orbitals of metal ion with orbitals of ligands. That means there should be overlapping of orbitals should be takes place between metal ion and ligands and sharing of electron pair between metal ion and ligands while formation of coordinate compounds. But CFT theory, it does not focus on the covalent nature of the that coordination bond formation in the plex. Then it explains that there is interaction between central metal ion and ligands while formation of complex, that is of electrostatic, it is pure electrostatic force of attraction is there. That means that CFT theory that which gives the explanation about the formation of ionic bond in the central metal ion and ligands. That means it focus on it that the bond between metal ion and ligand is not the covalent in nature, but it is a ionic in nature. Ionic nature, all of you studied about that in previous lecture. That means here bond between metal ion and ligand takes place because of here ligands donates electron pair to the metal ion, central metal ion, and central metal ion accepts electron pair from ligands. That means here ligands are electron pair donor and central metal ion, these are electron pair acceptor. And here when that ligand act as an electron pair donor, therefore it act as a Lewis base and metal ion act as a Lewis acid. That means here ionic bond formation takes place between metal ion and ligands, because ligands are electron rich substance or species, while metal ion, which is in cation form or in atomic form, which is electron deficient species. Therefore, between metal ion and ligands, ionic bond should be there. That means this theory explains the electrostatic force or interaction between metal ion and ligands. Here, this assumption explains the ionic nature of coordinate bond formation takes place in metal ion and ligands, but it cannot focus on that covalent nature of coordinate bond. And according to this theory, the second assumption, metal ion and ligand, which forms the bond between these two, is purely ionic in nature. That means here ionic bond formation takes place between ligand and metal ion, because here ligands act as a point charge with metal ion. That means here metal ion, central metal ion, the ligands which act as a point charge with one of the atom of the donor atom of the ligand. That means here this assumption is also give the information about the ionic nature of coordinate bond formation takes place in the complex. Then one more assumption that is of that theory. See here, when ligands are approaches towards metal ion, central metal ion which possesses that d orbitals, and d orbitals, vacant d orbitals, empty d orbitals of metal ion provides to the ligands. And when ligands approaches towards central metal ion, that is here the ligands when approaches only towards central metal ion, then the d orbitals of central metal ion, that is d orbital possesses 5 subshells, and these 5 subshells are of, see here, that is dx2y2, dz2, dxy, dyz, and dxz. See here, these are the 5 subshells of d orbitals of central metal ion. And when ligands approaches towards central metal ion, then now the before approaching of ligands towards central metal ion, these d orbitals which having the same energy level and they remain intact, that is they remains as it is. But when ligands approaches towards metal ion, then repulsion takes place between metal ion and ligands, and interaction takes place between metal ion and ligands, which causes the splitting of these degenerated d orbital. Now these orbitals are degenerated. D orbitals are there of metal ion, central metal ion. And when ligands approaches towards metal ion, then when ligands approaches towards metal ion by point charge, and then there is repulsion takes place between metal ion and ligands, and that repulsion between metal ion and ligands, it causes the splitting of these d orbitals into two sets. That is, these splitted into two sets. That is, here one of the set of two d orbitals, that is dx2y2 and dz2, and that set is called as Eg orbital, and thus one of the set, that is second set of d orbital, that is dxy, dyz and dxz, which is also known as T2g orbital. When the ligands approaches towards metal ion, then repulsion takes place between that metal ion and ligands takes place, which causes to split that d orbital. Why these d orbitals get splitted? It is because the repulsions interaction between metal ion and ligands, and when ligands approaches towards metal ion, then crystal field formation takes place around the metal ion, and that crystal field formation, that crystal field which is formed around the metal ion when ligands approaches towards metal ion to form the complex, then that if that crystal field formed around that metal ion is symmetrical, if it is symmetrical, then the degenerated d orbitals cannot split. That means they remains intact, that means they remains as it is. But generally, while formation of coordinate compounds, when ligands approaches towards metal ion, the crystal field which is formed around that metal ion is unsymmetrical. Generally, it is unsymmetrical when ligands approaches towards metal ion, and therefore when crystal field formation around the metal ion is unsymmetrical, then splitting should be takes place of that degenerated d orbitals of metal ion, central metal ion of the complex, and they splitted into two groups, and these groups, sets of d orbitals, they possesses a specific energy levels, and here, see here, when ligands approaches towards metal ion, then that ligand act as a point charge. That means that ligands interacts towards metal ion through the, that is with a point of attachment with the central metal ion with one of the donor atom, and here when splitting of these orbitals takes place, and the difference in the energies of these two set, that is difference in the energy of two set, are known as, that is known as crystal field splitting energy. Crystal field splitting energy, which is known as CFSE. That is CFSE means crystal field splitting energy is the difference in the energies of two sets of d orbitals of central metal ion. And here, see here, if the complex is octahedral, if complex is octahedral, then here splitted two sets of d orbital, then the Eg set of d orbital, it possesses higher energy, while T2G set of 3d orbitals, it possesses lower energy. And the crystal field splitting energy, that means the difference between these two is known as crystal field splitting energy, is depends upon the ligand's strength of ligand, which is approaches towards the central metal ion. Then value of that crystal field splitting energy is depends upon strength of ligands, and here the energy difference between two sets is known as delta naught, that is delta naught, that is 0.1 delta, and which is also expressed as 10 dq. That means the difference in the energies of these two sets is delta O, that is 0.1 delta, that is 10 dq. dq is the unit of that crystal field splitting energy. And here delta O symbol is used for CFT, that is if complex is octahedral. Here delta O means for octahedral complex or compound, and that is for crystal field splitting energy. And it is delta T for tetrahedral complex, that is the crystal field splitting energy for tetrahedral complex is denoted by delta T, and it is for octahedral complex, it is denoted by delta O. And the value of delta O is 0.1 delta, or it is also known, that is 10 dq. Then see here, the value of that CFT is depends upon the strength of ligand which is approaches towards metal ion. See here, for example, if that ligands are, the strength of that ligand is more, and when strength of ligand is more, that means that ligands are known as, that is strong field ligand. Then how to identify the strength of that ligands? Then see here, the groups or the compounds or ions which contains carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus, that ligands are generally strong field ligands. Then see here, for example, that is CO, NH3, CN. These are the examples of, that is C2O4 2 minus. These are the examples of strong field ligand. The ligands or group or ion which possesses carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus into it, these ligands are strong field ligands. That means strength of these ligands are greater or larger. And the group or ligands which possesses the halogen, that is chlorine, bromine, iodine, fluorine or sulfur or oxygen, those ligands are known as weak field ligands. And the crystal field splitting energy is depends upon the strength of ligand. That means here when strong field ligands approaches towards the central metal ion, then here energy of the Eg set. Then see here in octahedral complex. In octahedral complex, the energy of Eg set, that is dx2y2 and dz2 set, which is raised by 0.6 delta, that is here 6 dq. It is 6 dq, and here that means from it is original energy of the degenerated d orbital, it is raised by 0.6 delta or 6 dq, and here T2G orbitals, energy of that T2G orbitals or electrons which is enters into T2G orbitals, it is decreased by 0.4 delta, that is 4 dq. That means here CFSE is, that is 1 delta or it is 10 dq. And here when strong field ligands approaches towards central metal ion in octahedral complexes, here because of larger repulsion, the set which possesses higher energy levels. That means here in octahedral complexes, dx2y2 and dz2, these orbitals possesses larger repulsion with central metal ion, and therefore they possesses higher energy, and the T2G orbitals, that dxy, dyz and dxz, possesses lower energy because they possesses less repulsion with central metal ion. But in tetrahedral complex, for tetrahedral complex, in tetrahedral complex, here T2G orbital which possesses, that is higher energy level, because here greater repulsion, that is possessed by the these orbitals, that is dxy, dyz and dxz orbitals possesses higher repulsion by 0.4 delta, that is 4 dq, and electrons when enters into these orbitals, it is raised by energy 0.4 delta or 4 dq, while the lower energy levels, that means the remaining set of d orbital, that is Eg orbitals, that is dx2y2 and dz2 orbital possesses lower energy level by, that is the electrons enters into these orbitals, it is decreases by 0.6 delta, that is 6 dq. And see here the value of CFSE is depends upon also strength of that ligands which is approaches towards that central metal ion, and therefore here this theory explains about the strength of ligands. That means this theory distinguish between the strong field ligands as well as weak field ligands, and this theory explains the spectrochemical series in which the order of strength of ligands, that ligands are arranged according to their strength. And here, see here the halogens, that is iodine, that is I minus, Br minus, Cl minus, S2 minus, as well as F minus, OH minus, and C2O4 2 minus, as well as H2O Cn minus, then NCS minus, and EDTA, and NH3 Cn minus, and CO. That is the series of ligands which shows the increasing order of their strengths of ligands, and it distinguish that strong field ligand and weak field ligands, and different types of complex compound formation takes place according to the number of electrons present in the d orbital. That means, see here, if strong field ligands are approaches towards the central metal ion, larger splitting of that d orbitals takes place, which favors the pairing of electrons and which forms the low spin complex, and pairing of electrons takes place. Because strong field ligands which splitted these d orbitals is greater. That means here value of crystal field splitting energy is larger when strong field ligands are approaches towards it, and pairing of electrons takes place in those orbitals, and the complex formation is a low spin complex. While when weak field ligands approaches to a central metal ion, then the value of CFSE, that is crystal field splitting energy, is less, and which forms, and that energy is not sufficient to pairing the electrons. Therefore, pairing of electrons does not takes place. And here the high spin complex formation takes place. That means here nature of complex, whether it is low spin complex or high spin complex, depends upon, that is the value of CFSE, and that value of CFSE depends upon the strength of that ligands, whether that complex is tetrahedral or octahedral. Then the metal ion in which the d orbital which possesses one electron into it, then the 2 electrons in d orbital, 3 electrons in d orbital, as well as 8 electrons in d orbital of the metal ion, 9 electrons and 10 electrons in d orbital. That metal ion, when forms the complex, which does not distinction, there is no distinction in the high spin complex or low spin complex. That means the meaning of that postulate, that is if the central metal ion, that is central metal ion, which having 5 degenerated d orbitals, that is dx2y2, dz2, dxy, dyz and dxz, then if that d orbitals, that is n minus 1 d orbitals of central metal ion, if it possesses one electron, then the complex formation takes place by this metal ion. Then there is no distinction between nature of high spin complex or low spin complex formed by it, because here if the strong field ligand is approaches towards metal ion, weak field ligands interacts towards metal ion, then there is no distinction between, that is whether it is high spin or low spin. Because why? That when these degenerated d orbitals split into two sets, then that d orbital possesses one electron, and that splitting of d orbitals which possesses electrons or filling of electrons in those orbitals takes place according to the above principle and Hund's rule. Then here dx2y2, dz2, that is EG set, and that is T2G set, that is dxy, dyz and dxz. Here only one electron is there. Therefore, if the strong field ligand approaches towards that metal ion, then electrons remains in the dxy, and if the weak field ligands approaches towards that, then the electrons filling takes place in those set, that is EG set and T2G set, that is same. That means here only one electron is there, therefore it remains in the lower energy set, that is in T2G set. Therefore, if the strong field ligands approaches towards metal ion or weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion which possesses only one electron in d orbital, then the electronic configuration, which is same for strong field ligands or weak field ligands, approaches towards metal ion while formation of complex. Similarly, if it possesses two electrons, then that second electron which remains, that both electrons, two electrons remains in the T2G orbital for both type of complexes, if strong field ligands approaches or weak field ligands approaches to that metal ion. Similarly, there is no distinction between for D3, because for D3 the electronic configuration, that is 3 electrons remains in the T2G set whether strong field or weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion. And similarly for D8, D9 and D10 electrons, that means suppose there are total 8 electrons are there, then these 8 electrons are filled into these two sets. If strong field ligands approaches towards metal ion, then these 8 electrons filled into those orbitals according to Hund's rule and above principle. Here when strong field ligands approaches towards metal ion, then pairing of electron takes place. Here pairing of electron takes place, therefore see here 1 electron, 2, 3, 4th electron, pairing of electron takes place here, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th electrons enters into EG orbital when 8 electrons are present in d orbital. Then when if the weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion, then there are total 8 electrons in metal ion, therefore here, but when weak field ligands approaches, then pairing of electron does not take place, therefore first electron enters here, second enters here, third, fourth enters here, fifth, sixth enters here, and seventh electron enters here, and eighth electrons. That means here the electronic configuration is the same for D8 configuration. Similarly, for D9 configuration, whether strong field ligands approaches or weak field ligands approaches, it is like then electron first enters into this P2G, and here pairing takes place because strong field ligand is there. Therefore, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. Here filling of 9 electrons into splitted d orbitals. If weak field ligands approaches towards it, then first electrons enters here, second, third, fourth electron does not enters here, pairing does not takes place. The fourth electron enters here, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth and ninth. Then electronic configuration is same for both, whether strong field ligand or weak field ligand approaches towards metal ion. If there are 10 electrons, then electronic configuration is same for both type of ligands approaches towards the metal ion to form the complexes. Therefore, that means the metal ion which possesses 1 electron in d orbital, 2, 3 electrons in d orbital, or 8, 9 or 10 electrons in d orbital, there is no distinction between low spin complex formation or high spin complex formation takes place, but it is distinction between the nature of complex takes place if metal ion possesses 4 electrons, 5 electrons, 6 electrons and 7 electrons in it. Then see here, if there are 4 electrons are there, then these 4 electrons enters into the splitted d orbitals of metal ion. If strong field ligand is approaches, then 1 electron, 2, 3, as strong field ligands approach towards metal ion to form the complex, then 4th electrons get paired here. And if weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion to form the complex, then first electron, second, third and 4th electrons enters into Eg orbital, because pairing of electron does not take place if weak field ligand forms the complex with metal ion. Then there is a difference in the electronic configuration of that d orbitals of metal ion. If strong field ligand approaches, then pairing of electrons takes place. Therefore, here low spin complex takes place. Low spin complex formation takes place, and here pairing of electron does not takes place when weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion. Then here high spin complex formation takes place. High spin complex formation takes place. That means here we can distinguish the nature of complex, whether it is low spin complex or high spin complex, for only if there are configuration of D is D4, D5, D6 or D7 for the metal ion. For 5 electrons, see here, 5th electrons get paired here, and here 5th electrons enters here. There is also difference in the electronic configuration. Therefore, there is distinction between low spin complex and high spin complex. That means metal ion which possesses 5 electrons in its orbital, then if strong field ligands approaches towards it, then it forms the low spin complex, and weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion, then it forms the high spin complex. Similarly, for 6 electrons, then 6th electrons enters here because pairing takes place and low spin complex takes place if strong field ligands approaches towards it, and here 6th electrons get paired here. Therefore, electronic configuration for D6 is different. Similarly, for D7, 7th electron here enters here, and here seventh electrons enters here. Therefore, there is a distinction between, there is difference in the electronic configuration when strong field ligands approaches towards it, then it forms the low spin complex, and if weak field ligands approaches towards metal ion, then it forms the high spin complex. Then that is about the formation of different types of complexes according to the CFT theory. This theory explains the color of the complexes also. Then we will be discussing on how color of complexes are determined by this theory. Then see a color of the complex which having octahedral geometry. Taking one of the example of that octahedral geometry complexes. The d orbitals of central metal ion is splitted into two sets, and here Eg orbital which possesses higher energy level, that is dx2y2 and dz2, and T2g orbitals which possesses the lower energy, that is by dxy, dyz and dxz. Then see here, that is the d orbital of titanium 3 plus ion which is present in TiH2O6 3 plus complex. See here, the color of that complex is purple in color. Purple in color. In this complex, oxidation state of titanium is +3. That means here the central metal ion which is Ti3 plus, and coordination number is 6. Therefore, that is having geometry octahedral. And difference between energies between these two sets is denoted by delta O. That is, see here, the titanium which having atomic number 22. Then electronic configuration is 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s2, 3p6, 4s2 and 3d2. That means there are the valence electronic configuration for titanium atom is 4s2, 3d2. But for titanium 3 plus, there are 3 electrons loosened by that titanium atom. Therefore, 2 electrons from 4s, that is loosened, and here 1 electron from D, that is loosened by that titanium to form the Ti3 plus ion. Therefore, here electronic configuration for Ti3 plus, in which 4s possesses, that is empty, and 3d possesses 1 electron. That means in titanium 3 plus, valence electron d orbital possesses 1 electron in it. 6H2 approaches towards Ti3 plus to form the complex. The energy here, which is crystal field energy, that is crystal field splitting energy, that is delta O, which is depends upon or which corresponds to the a specific, that is electromagnetic radiations. Electromagnetic radiations in visible range, in visible range of sunlight or light energy. And here specific wavelength of light energy absorbed by that electron, and here electron from T2g orbital is jumps to the higher energy level. When that electron from T2g set which absorbs the energy and it jumps to the Eg orbital. and therefore the difference between energy of these two sets of orbital, which is responsible to give the color to that complex or imparts the color to that complex. And here that delta O, that is energy, which is related for that promotion of electron from T2G to EG orbital of Ti3 plus ion. And here the light energy absorbed by that electron when it is present in T2G, then the complementary wavelength of light energy which imparts the color to that complex. Then what is complementary color? See here, Yalgudre. These are 7 colors, that is violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange and red. Then see here the diagram in which Yalgudre, that is V, I, indigo, which is whitish in color, B, G, Y, O and R. Here, if the metal ion absorbs the wavelength of red light energy, then complementary of that wavelength of light energy is wavelength of green color light energy, and that is the complementary color of particular wavelength of light energy. Therefore, here when that electron absorbs a specific light energy of particular wavelength, then complementary of that wavelength of light energy imparts the color to that complex. And here the color of that titanium, that is that complex, is purple, because here that complex or that electron which absorbs energy of 520 nm, complementary color of that wavelength which imparts the color to that complex, and that is purple color. And here the electron jumps from lower energy to higher energy, from d orbital to d orbital of the same metal ion. Therefore that process is called as dd transition, and because of dd transition, that delta value of which corresponds to the color of that complex. That means here that is about the CFT theory. Thank you.